Tonight we have with us Danny Levengood. Danny was a past president of the fair and has been a lifelong community member of the Oley Valley and involved with the fair since the beginning, although very young at the very first fair. Probably doesn't remember much about that one, but can you talk a little bit about how the fair and the fire company had worked together originally to get the fair rolling?
Yeah, thank you for having me here this evening. In the early days of the fair, I haven't missed a fair in 75 years. I haven't missed a fair. So, but I don't remember, like was mentioned, I don't remember too much about the earlier fairs. But I know in the 1950s, the mid 50s or whatever, when everything was done in the school building, then additional townships were added to the school district. They formed a joint venture with the surrounding townships, and they had to expand on that. And at that time, I heard my dad and my grandfather talking about they didn't know if the fair was going to continue because they had these major hurdles to overcome in finding a place for the fair if they wanted to continue, because they could no longer be in this, use the school grounds. That was going to be built for the new high school and eventually athletic fields and everything in the areas where the fair was being held. So they had, I think it was 2 meetings in succession, and I remember my dad leaving for the one meeting. He said, well, when you come home tonight, there might not be an Oley Fair anymore, but they did decide to continue it, and they approached the fire company about moving across the street. Now that area, during the original fairs, that area where the fairgrounds is currently was actually the parking area for the fair, and what we referred to as the old bingo building and old refreshment building. They'd serve meals, daytime meals there for the earlier fairs. So they, in the late 50s, they got together. Well, they decided they have to move over to the other side, and there was a building on the school ground, actually where the athletic fields are, the ball fields are now. There was a building where the fair used to store all their equipment, and they had Army surplus tents that were set up every year, and all the supplies were kept in this one cement block building. Well, as a result of the construction, that building had to come down. So 1 year after the fair, everything was moved up to Rusk Manor Township. To one of the former president of the fair was Clifford Chafee. He had a barn there that was unused, and they moved all the fair supplies up to that building for a year or two, and then had to bring them back for the following year's fair. And then I think the following year, well, when they moved to the fire company grounds, the facilities over there weren't enough to accommodate the people. So the first year, I think, that had moved across the street, the French fry building and the toilet facilities were erected. Subsequent to that, there was, I think, let me see, I believe the flour and electric building were built. And then, well, when they did move across the street, when they were in the school building, all the rooms of the school, on a Wednesday we used to get out of school at noontime. From noontime till I think 4 o'clock or something, there was a transition of those rooms. All the desks and everything were moved to 1 or 2 classrooms on each floor, and the rest of the rooms were vacated so that they could put some commercial exhibitors in there, and some of the displays like the arts and crafts and things like that were displayed in other rooms. And of course, when the fair was over on Sunday morning, everything had to be cleared out and gotten ready so that they could have school the following Monday again. So that was a hectic time. So then when it moved across the street, they didn't have to do that any longer. But the things that were the commercial exhibits that were exhibited in the school and stuff, they purchased 2 large tents first year that they moved over there. They were 60 by 100. They were put in, you had to put wooden stakes, like 4-inch wooden stakes, 3-4-inch wooden stakes around the perimeter of this tent every 5 feet. And there was to drive these stakes, it was in shale ground. It was very hard. But there was a circus up at the fairgrounds a couple of months before the fair, and they had a stake driver there. And one of the volunteers for the fair said he had a machine shop. Well, he can build a stake driver like that. So he builds a stake driver and come fair time, they had this to drive the stakes. Well, this sounds real good. They have a stake driver like that, hammer these stakes in with no effort. Well, it was a machine that lifted the hammer up like an 8-foot distance. It traveled to the top, but there was no brake on it to stop at the top. So when you had to pull the handle, put the stake in while it was going up, and then it would be released. Where there was so much controversy about this, everybody was talking into it, knew how to do it, but nobody knew how to operate this stake driver safely. In addition, there was a brand new engine on it, but the engine was a Lemon. It was made in a Lemon factory. Well, this thing, you'd take the stake half or 3/4 of the way up, and the thing would cut out. Like I said, there's no brake on it, so it's coming down. Well, many stakes got smashed in half and everything doing that, and after seeing it operated one or two times, nobody wanted to touch the thing anymore. Well, well, let's back up a little bit. Some of the other buildings were built every year in the early 60s. They tried to put 1 or 2 buildings up. I graduated from high school in 1964, so I was in the class of 63. We had our cake and cider stand over on the fairgrounds, and at that time, I think that year, the Flower Building in its earliest version was built. Additionally, the electric service building was built, and then we continued to use these other tents for the commercial exhibits and things like that. But then I think in 1965, what is the commercial exhibit building now was built. Okay, we're rid of this stake driver and putting these big tents up. Oh no, we have the new building, but we're going to use the existing tents for that. We're going to put the vegetables, farm crops, and fruits and vegetables were also in that building. So we had to keep putting those tents up every year. And during that time period, we had a drought in this area. You could hardly, it was almost impossible to drive these wooden stakes in. And like I said, no one else wanted to operate it. Well, I'm the young kid in the block here. You could operate the stake driver. And I can still recall I was operating it, and like I said, you could never trust it if it was going to work or not. And somebody while I was operating it, somebody else was trying to tell me how to do it. And I still remember my grandfather saying, "If you don't want to operate it yourself, you just keep your mouth shut, or he's gonna walk away from it." And he said, and from that point on, I'd operate it on my own. So that, but then eventually we did install a brake on it, and that made it much safer. But we had trouble with that thing from the whole period. When I think it was the late 60s, maybe it was 1970, we put we refer to the vegetable or agricultural building now. That building was built. Okay, we don't need these. Now we can finally get rid of these tents. We don't have to deal with those anymore. Well, I think it was mentioned earlier in an interview that these tents we put them up for auction and to sell them. And the owner of the Crystal Restaurant bought them, and they were installed after that in Reading. I wasn't involved with that installation in Reading, but after they were at Reading, the owner took it. He had a food stand at the Reading Air Show, and he wanted to set up the tent at the Reading Air Show. So lo and behold, we had to go up to the Reading Air Show, and they said he's going to buy the tent, but we have to set it up for him up there yet. So I went along up there to set up the tent at the air show, and we get a phone call the following day. They had a windstorm and tore the tent. When we get up there, here they raised the side of the tent higher than it was supposed to be, backed a tractor trailer on it, and it was split from top to bottom, and the tent had to be repaired before they could continue. Okay, now we're rid of the tents. No, there was a second tent. Went over to I think it was Lancaster Mennonite School, and the deal was they'd buy the tent, but we had to set it up the first time for them over there. So once again, I went along over there and had to set that tent up one last and final time with the stake driver, but then we got beyond that.
Do you remember about the commercial exhibit building being constructed?
Yes, that was put up. My grandfather and a neighbor of mine. When that building came, it was the trusses were too long to haul, so they put them into two. They made in halves. They had to all be bolted together, and I know my grandfather, I was working on the farm at that time, but they were down there just about every day for several weeks till they had all these big 60-foot long trusses bolted together. It was, I don't know how they even got them to get the section, pull them together, but they accomplished that and got those ready for, they had a crane to actually set them, but they had to assemble them before they had the crane, and they wanted to save money any way they could.
From your years of being president, do you remember any weather-related issues or?
Well, I think I was president about 20 years, no, excuse me, 15 years, and I think we had 15 years of rain during that time. That was even prior to my being president. For the early years, my children and everything wore winter coats for the fair. I know the one year in the commercial exhibit building, the office was in the very corner, and we had to actually close the doors on the northwest side of the building for the Friday and Saturday of the fair because it was that windy and cold. It would just blow everything away from all the exhibitors' stands, and we had to close those doors, and all the people had to enter from the Jefferson Street entrance of that building. We couldn't even have the doors open there. Now today everybody's walking around in shorts at the fair and never need winter coats. I haven't needed winter coats for 30 plus years.
What about any rains or hurricanes?
Rains and hurricanes, we were through a number of those. One time I know we were down there, but I think working on that same engine on this pole driver, and it was remnants of a hurricane came up through, and actually my dad and I were there working on this motor, and it was pouring down rain. And just like that, the skies opened up, clear blue sky. It lasted for about 5 or 10 minutes. It must have been the eye of the storm went right over us, and then it changed again, and it was back to the pouring down rain like it had been several minutes or half an hour beforehand. And we had to deal with storms. Well, actually, when the Fair Center was built, I think that year we had the first or second year of that being built, we had a tremendous storm. That was the only time that I know that the fair was closed, couldn't open on opening day. We had to wait till the following day till we got the tents set up again and back in getting into operation, restored everything.
Any other favorite memories you have from through the years?
Well, I have a lot of memories. I mean, nothing really jumps out at me, but I have, like I say, I've been attending the fair every year, and hopefully I can continue for some years to come.
Well, thank you for all your service,
okay,
and I appreciate
thank you very much.
Coming this evening.
Dina, can we ask one more question?
Sure.
Or if we can save it for you, it doesn't matter.
All right, let's see.
So your grandfather, Warren Levengood, was one of the original founders of the Oley Fair. If he was around for the fair today, what do you think he'd say about the Oley Fair?
Oh, I think he'd be impressed because he was the one instrumental in the continuance of the fair when they were on the verge of disbanding it in the 50s. He did not want to see that go away, and he would be. I actually went to. They always talked about this, that they went around to visit other fairs, and my wife and I think it was probably in the early 90s, we went to visit the Green Dreyer Fair. That was when my dad and my grandfather were on a hunting trip up in Poconos, and they picked up a fair catalog and saw that from the fair up there, and he said, my grandfather says to my dad, this is what we need to do in Oley. And that was where the idea came from. And we were up at that fair, like I say, in the 90s, and they were still operating much as the Oley Fair had done in the late 40s and 50s, working in a school building and adjoining the right adjacent properties. And it wasn't, I mean, Oley far surpassed that fair at that time, but like I say, they were still operating in the schools, with the schools.